Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Infinity Fast Forward webinar series. My name is Steve Kessler, and I'm going to be the host of the program today. We have an interesting topic on hand for everybody today. In this business, we talk an awful lot about insurance, but mostly about liability insurance and the issue of workers' compensation is another big piece of that. So what we're going to talk about today is using workers' compensation to impact safety culture. We have a couple of attorneys from Scopelitis, as you all probably know, one of the best well-known law firms that represent transportation in the country. So I'm sure you're all familiar with them. But before we get started here, let me uh, touch on a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, we can't hear you. So if you want to make a comment or have a question, you can use the chat box or jump into the Q&A box and pose your question or your comments. So that's how you can communicate with us. So why don't you jump in the chat and just let us know who you are, what company you're with, where you are, so we know who's out there. And while you all are doing that, I'm going to introduce Mark Rhea. Mark is an industry veteran. He joins us for most all the webinars, does a lot of consulting work in the business these days. So Mark, uh, got any comments about work comp from your standpoint?
Oh, absolutely. Really looking forward to today's discussion on workers' comp. It can get very complicated. A lot of legal landmines out there, if you will, on workers' comp. And of course, in today's freight market, every dollar counts, and there are absolutely dollars that can be uh, avoided with understanding and implementing a risk uh, management program designed to help this workers' comp issue that it differs to state. And again, it can get very complicated, and I'm looking forward to it. And just as a sidebar, I think the Infinity learning management system really is supports being able to produce either custom content or specialized content directed at your staff to avoid workers' comp claims and what to do once you have an accident and somebody gets hurt. So looking forward to that. And just as another reminder, fall is right around the corner, and with the weather changing, things get a little slippery out there, and I think the claims will certainly go up for our friends in the workers' comp field. So, looking forward to today and ready to get started.
Very good. Thanks, Mark. We're having a little bit of an issue here, folks. I'm trying to get our guests connected up. So if you just bear with me here a second. Um, Margaret, I don't know if you can hear me, if you've been able to log in, but would you jump on the chat and let me know that you're on here? Uh, Folks, sorry for the little technical glitch there, but we're all set to go now. Um, as I said, we have two attorneys that are joining us from Scopelitis. I hope I say that right, Margaret. Um,
You are saying it right. Thank you.
Perfect. Uh, my first introduction is Margaret Krei. I believe I've said that correctly. Uh, Margaret focuses her practice on workers' compensation defense, including analysis of compensability of claims, negotiation of settlements, and communication with claims representatives. She also offers minimizing, avoiding workers' compensation risk training sessions for the insurance industry and self-insured employers who handle workers' compensation claims. Margaret has experience representing clients in administrative law proceedings in Wisconsin. She has presented on topics including ethical dilemmas in workers' compensation and best practices when dealing with workers' compensation claims. Margaret regularly volunteers with the Milwaukee Eviction Defense Project, assisting low-income tenants who are facing eviction. Joining Margaret is Michael McFarlane. Michael provides strategic defenses and advice for self-insured employers facing workers' compensation claims. His experience includes significant appellate litigation before the Labor and Industry Review Commission, Circuit Court, and Court of Appeals. Michael counsels on high-value workers' compensation cases involving complex facts and legal issues. Michael's work includes investigations, preparing case analysis for clients, assisting the team in managing the direction of litigation, drafting global settlement agreements to help clients proactively avoid potential claims not covered by workers' compensation, and guiding clients through subrogation opportunities to recover benefits paid. Okay, having said all that, I'm going to turn the program over, I guess, to Margaret first. So I'm going to move the slide and turn it over to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Appreciate the warm welcome and introduction, and thank you everyone for dealing with our technical problems. We tried to get fancy and use a conference room with a camera and a Polycom device, but we should just go the old-fashioned way with a little laptop screen and us scrunched up next to each other, and that works just fine. You can go ahead to the next slide, please, Steve. I'm thrilled to hear from Mark that it sounds like many of the people on this call are probably familiar with Scopelitis, which we appreciate. So you're probably aware we can be found just about everywhere in the country that you might have transportation needs. Obviously, a holistic practice that covers everything transportation industry clients might need. Michael and I focus our practice specifically in workers' compensation defense, but of course, Scopelitis handles the full gamut of transportation needs. You can go to the next slide. So our plan today is to do a pretty brief background on the basics of a work injury, process of a work injury claim, the good and the bad of having a work injury. And then the majority of our time we want to spend on how to improve work safety. So those first things are a little bit of a breeze through. As Steve mentioned, if anyone has questions while we're going through the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to pay attention to that so that we can answer them, and we'll make sure to work that into our presentation. If we don't have time to get to any of your specific questions, our contact information will be on the last slide, and you're certainly welcome to reach out to us with any questions. You can go to the next slide, Steve.
Sure.
All right, so I'm just going to start with the basics of a work injury. This language here is Wisconsin terminology where we practice, but the concepts are pretty universal for workers' compensation, no matter the jurisdiction. Obviously, a work injury requires an injury. In our state, that's defined as a physical or mental harm caused by either an accident or an occupational exposure. We see a lot of times that accident and injury are used interchangeably. As we talk today, we'll try to keep those words separately because they do have distinct meanings. Furthermore, jurisdiction, Part B there. Jurisdiction can be in multiple states concurrently. That's something to be aware of. So a lot of times, a claim will take place where the injury happens, or maybe where the employment contract was entered into, or maybe where the employer's home base is. There's a lot of things that can factor into it, and from state to state, the jurisdictional rules are not uniform. But it is important to know that you could have multiple jurisdictions, and if you're dealing with litigation or a claim, you may want to just double check and make sure that you're reaching a resolution in all the jurisdictions relevant to the case. Third, the injury needs to happen when the employee is working. In our state, that's a very broad thing. Even when the employee is not working, the employee can be working, especially when we're talking about truck drivers. The traveling employee concept, I'm familiar that that's in a lot of jurisdictions as well. But in Wisconsin, once the truck driver heads out on the road, they are working the entire time they are out there until they come back and leave the terminal, or if they're at home or whatever. Third is the cause. Usually it's a medical question. Did the accident or the occupational exposure cause the injury? I hit on these just because we're going to come back to them, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, this is Wisconsin terminology. It may not be exactly the same in the states you're concerned about, but it should be familiar at least. Next slide, please. Next, the process of claiming a work injury. Obviously, it starts with reporting the injury. Different jurisdictions have different rules on that. In our state, you can report an injury years after it happens and still have a viable claim. I'm a fan of the jurisdictions where you need to report it within a few days or a few weeks. It really makes the next point, investigation, a lot easier. And I'll be talking a lot more about investigation. It's one of my favorite topics. I have some ideas on how you can improve your investigations concurrent with improving your safety culture. Second, there's a lot of paperwork involved. If the injured worker is capable of doing something, if not their own job, there's modified duty hassles that need to be addressed. A lot of times you may be working with a third-party vendor that finds modified duty opportunities at nonprofits and outside organizations. I know for a fact that a lot of work goes into making that work as well. If the case goes on long enough, and if it's contentious enough, lawyers get involved. That's fun. Fun for us, maybe not fun for everybody else. And then litigation obviously gets rolling there. And again, depending on the jurisdiction, that can be a different animal. Here in Wisconsin, it is not unusual for a case to take years to resolve. Decades is feasible, although that is the exception. Likely a lot of these procedural steps will overlap with the injured worker feeling symptoms or being disabled, obviously. And I bring that up because again, we're going to come back to this, and it's all going to fit together. Next slide, please.
Michael, I had a quick question on reporting.
Yes.
Is it a training opportunity for a company to train the coworkers to report potential accidents? Does that classify as a report, or is it the injured person that has to do the reporting?
Well, reporting has a couple of meanings in workers' compensation. From the insurance standpoint, and maybe even from the employer standpoint, they may be thinking of reporting as documents that need to be filed with the state or the commission or whatever it's called in each jurisdiction. I'm really referencing report of injury, like you mentioned, and generally a coworker does not report another injury. Should they? I don't see a downside to it. At the end of the day, the claim needs to come from the injured worker. So if a coworker said, hey, I just saw John trip and fall, and now he's limping, I don't think that's a bad thing for an employee to bring that to the employer's attention. The employer may need to then go to John and say, John, what happened? Are you injured? There are people in this world who don't want to admit their injury. And, I guess maybe from an employer standpoint that we should consider ourselves lucky when somebody doesn't report their injury. But I think in reality, you should want to know, you should want to address it. You don't want an injured worker going out and trying to do their job injured. They could be mentally distracted. They could be physically, not 100%, and that's a danger in itself.
And witness statements are something that we commonly ask for in the investigation stage of a claim. So certainly it'll be helpful at some point. We always want to know, were there any witnesses to any accident? Okay, this next slide's going to go real quick because realistically, there really isn't anything good about a work injury. No one's going to get rich off of it. Some employees have this, I don't know if it comes from the movies or just pie in the sky idea that they're going to claim a work injury and be set for life. You're not. You're never going to be better off with a work injury than you would have been if you had one. The only possible exception that Michael thought of to a good thing about a work injury is very, very, very rarely you could have an incidental finding during a medical evaluation. You didn't know you had a giant tumor growing in your stomach until you went to get a MRI for something. But I mean, what are the odds of that?
I had to strain myself for that one.
Yes, realistically, there's nothing good about a work injury. So you can go to the next slide, Steve. There is, however, a lot that's bad about work injuries, as we all know. Even though it is our bread and butter, this is what we work in and day out, even we don't want work injuries. We don't like it when people are actually injured. So, no brainer, the injury itself is not good. If a truck driver has a broken arm, that truck driver cannot operate the rig and they're out of work for a while. The cost of disability payments and having that employee out of work, needing to find an employee to replace that driver who can no longer drive, the stress of everything, not just on the worker, on their family, on their coworkers who maybe now have to pick up slack. If the claim ever ends up denied, that is sometimes detrimental to the employee-employer relationship. And of course, a lot of times it's not actually the employer denying the claim, it's the insurance company or us. You can always blame the lawyers if you need a scapegoat. We're used to that. If a claim ends up in litigation, the costs, the time, that's also bad. And like I mentioned before, it's really inadequate compensation. There are statutory caps in Wisconsin, and I'm sure in most other jurisdictions, that no one's going to get rich or set for life. If someone is 40 years old and they have some type of catastrophic work injury, they're not going to have a great life for the second half or hopefully longer of their life. It's really inadequate to have you live the kind of comfortable life you'd want to be living. And it's really a life-changing impact in all aspects of your life. Honestly, even a small injury, something as silly as you weren't being careful trying to release the fifth wheel on your truck, and so you ripped too hard and you tore your rotator cuff. You need surgery. Going under anesthesia and having surgery is a major life event. Maybe you're only out of work for 3 months. So it's not one of these catastrophic cases that we're talking about, but that's still a detrimental impact to your family, to your coworkers. It really should be avoided at all costs. So you can go to the next slide.
Hey, Margaret, real quick, this is Steve.
Of
Is it not true that in the majority of workers' compensation claims that the indirect costs as a result of a work injury are often more than what the work comp insurance is going to pay? I think you just sort of touched on them. If you have to replace people, you have to train new people. That's things that are not covered by work comp. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely.
I know Department of Labor actually publishes some information that generally, if it's a fairly large injury claim, that the indirect costs are more than what work comp insurance will pay. It just made me think of that when you were talking about stress and replacing people that have been injured and other costs that are associated with that.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine you have an employee who's been there for a decade and has all this institutional knowledge.
Exactly.
And then now that employee, even if they're just gone for 3 months while they're getting surgery, you have other people filling in that role who don't have anywhere near the institutional knowledge. They're not going to work as effectively as that employee with a decade of institutional knowledge.
Next slide.
Please.
So with all of that background, I want to hopefully prevent any fears that Mark put into your head. Workers' compensation is extremely complicated, and we are going to try to avoid all of the complicated stuff today. Um, we are going to maybe reference the complicated stuff, but we're not gonna dive into those details. I don't think it makes for a very lively discussion. Um, so the gist here of this presentation is to use what you know, what we know, what your teammates know about workers' compensation, to educate your workforce about workers' compensation and really impart upon them the understanding that work injuries are bad, like the last slide said, and they're bad for them more than anybody else. They, if they really understand how bad a work injury can get, and they don't always get that way, um, I believe that you can raise their awareness and become that they can't not start recognizing safety risks all around them in life. I speak from my own experience. I don't work in a dangerous job, but I read and live workers' compensation, 5 days a week, and I don't really stop thinking about it on the weekends. Um, I see danger and risks everywhere. I'm not a I'm not a trained safety manager or anything like that, but I see them everywhere. I drive my kids and my wife nuts pointing things out, but um, we're always thinking about it. And I think that um, if you and your workforce are thinking about half as much as we are, work injuries can be prevented. And really, that's the best policy for managing your workers' compensation costs is to prevent injuries in the first place. Um, I also think that injuries are going to happen, and if you have alert, safety conscious employees, they can mitigate their injuries. They hopefully won't be as bad when they occur. Um, and then another sort of philosophy I have, and I don't have any science to back it up, but I think that if you talk to employees about workers' compensation, injuries, the process, how it might go, hypothetical situations, maybe not even hypothetical situations. Maybe if you can, find somebody who's had somebody in your company who's had a work injury, a former employee, a current employee, and they're willing to talk about their experience. I think it can be really impactful. And when people know what's coming, that mental preparedness, I think, can be beneficial as well in terms of making sure that they're cooperative in the process, they're motivated to get better, they're motivated to get the right treatment, and they're not focused on maximizing the payday or the payout, like a lot of injured workers that we see. So um, I've kind of covered all these bullet points in a general overview, but I think really the bottom line is that you kind of want to scare your employees into caring a little bit more, and it's a bit of a downer to focus on all of the bad of a workers' compensation case. So I don't necessarily suggest you make this the core thrust of your safety program.
And we can frame it a little better too. So something we encourage and counsel employers a lot is to promote a positive safety culture. So I would be surprised if each of you on this call doesn't reference your safety culture. And everyone thinks of that, cartoon placard up saying, 0 days since our last incident or accident. That's what we want. But really, if you are focusing on a positive safety culture, accidents will still happen, but that would be a way to frame it in a positive light. But like Michael says, people need to know the bad parts of a workers' compensation injury so that they are aware that it's not a quick ticket to retirement. Certainly not one that they would want to pursue.
And I think these ideas that we're going to discuss, or that we're discussing today, can be folded into your existing program. It's just a matter of, you know, your educators, whoever's teaching at the safety meetings, you know, has their anecdotes or their, you know, their 2 or 3 workers' compensation points that they want to tack on to the safety training. I was looking at a safety training checklist the other day. And I bring this one up a lot because I see it a lot. The 3 points of contact as drivers are entering and exiting their semi-tractors. And I think there's a pretty universal standard on how that's supposed to go. But when I read the safety documents, it just tells you how to do it. You know, I imagine some employers are probably adding and elaborating on that, and some aren't, because I see different safety cultures, you know, with different employers that I work with. But we see people get injured all the time, exiting their truck the right way. Usually, it comes down to they come down maybe a little too hard onto their leg. They, instead of sort of setting their foot down carefully, maybe like they're testing, you know, if the ice is thick enough, they're just letting gravity bring them down on the ground. Well, you do that enough times, and if you're you know, a really big person, or you're an older person with, you know, degenerative knees, that impact can be enough to you know, pop your meniscus or just strain a ligament. And as I'm sure Margaret will probably elaborate on this, you know, little things can blow up into big things. So even if that's what it looks like to begin with, they can turn into sort of massive, huge problems for everybody involved. So, like I'm saying, maybe in addition to telling people how to do the 3 points of contact and entering and exit their truck, talk about how, you know, be really gentle, setting your foot down. It sounds silly. It maybe even looks a little silly. You know, logically, it'll probably take you an extra second, but that extra time and that extra care is totally worth it if it means that you didn't blow out your knee and you're going to be out of work for 6 months or 3 months for a meniscus injury, and then, you know, a little bit down the line, you're going to be out of work for another 6 months to a year because of a knee replacement. If you're ever getting back to work after that, I don't know. But simple things that we kind of take for granted in our daily life, or maybe the drivers do, you know, taking that extra minute to think about how can these things that are automatic for us turn into injuries. I think having those discussions can really open a lot of eyes.
I think taking the time and care is something that Michael and I really want to emphasize as well. We know that all of your businesses have needs. Everyone wants to work as efficiently as possible. And of course, managers are going to be passing that down to the people underneath them. And so this culture kind of forms of we have to do as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And whether that's loading a truck quickly, because if we get on the road 5 minutes earlier, it saves us X amount of dollars. Or if we take a shortcut and we don't have to make this stop, then we can save X amount of dollars. That's a really slippery slope, and you can get into some really serious injuries trying to cut corners. So if it comes from the top down that we don't want you cutting corners, we don't want you to try to save 2 minutes by stacking an extra pallet and then using the forklift for that rather than doing it one less pallet and making 2 trips. That's really important to emphasize to your workers, because if they are injured because they were trying to hurry, then they might be out of work for months. Whereas if they had just taken a couple extra minutes, it really would not have slowed down the process that more. And so I think that's a stress point for employees. There are a lot of employers out there who just want them to do the most as quickly as possible. But we know just by being on this call, you care about your employees, and of course you want everything to be as profitable as possible, but you care about your employees. You don't want them to be hurt. It's going to save you money in the long run if they don't get hurt.
And I mentioned the tough guy that maybe doesn't immediately report their injury because they think it's minor and it'll feel better after I walk it off. Those are the people I think you really need to watch out for and speak very explicitly to to that part of your workforce. Explain to them that when we say if the fifth wheel release is stuck or frozen, we don't want you to just keep forcing it until it releases. We really want you to contact maintenance or whoever the person is to contact to have the equipment looked at, because maybe it's defective, maybe it's broken, maybe it needs some care. And I think it's really easy to sort of get in the mind of those people who are like, oh, if I just give it a little bit more oomph, it'll release and then I can get on with my day. Again, they're trying to save a little bit of time, get out there, get their deliveries going or whatever, and it ends up turning into a rotator cuff tear that's gonna keep them from doing deliveries for a lot longer. And we hope that our workforce uses impeccable judgment in these situations, but they're human and sometimes they think they know better. And it's important to sort of anticipate these things before they happen, so that when they confront it, they don't have to be tempted by a bad judgment. They've been told explicitly, clearly, multiple times, don't do it. And they've been given good reasons why they shouldn't do it. And I think that's another big one is making sure that people understand the reasons behind the safety rules. It may seem obvious, but not everybody sees the things that we see, and everybody's got a different perspective on it.
And another thing along the lines of safety culture that we found employers really benefit from is a degree of uniformity in applying your safety culture, no matter what the injury is. So, like Michael talked about that, tough guy persona who doesn't want to report an injury. If you have it as a mandatory, there's no questions about it. You are filling out an accident form, whether you cut your finger and just needed a Band-Aid or something very serious happened and you needed to go to the hospital. If it's just a mandatory of like, hey, no matter what it is, we just fill out this form, we document it, we don't have to make a big deal out of it. If you apply your policies and procedures uniformly to every employee and every injury, then there should never be any question of someone saying, oh, I don't want to report that because I don't want to seem like a baby. No, you're going to report that. And there are many, it's really investigation reasons down the line. But that way it's this even playing ground. And it's just, this is what we do as a company. As soon as there's an injury or an accident, we tell someone. And then, of course, everyone always has those lines on their safety forms. How could this have been prevented in the future? So then that's what the managers would look into.
And I'll add that I know that there are a lot of companies that, as a matter of policy, immediate reporting is required. And I think that's great. It needs to be reconciled sometimes with the law, where the law says an injured worker has more than just that instant moment to report an injury. In Wisconsin, again, you can report an injury years late and it's still a valid claim. But even though an injured worker technically, legally might have that extra time to report an injury, it's important to again explain why they shouldn't take that extra time. It's not to their benefit to take that extra time. It's not to the company's benefit, and to benefit the company is to benefit the workforce. It's you're all on the same team, and when the injured worker has that trust, reporting an injury is the right thing to do. My company tells me it's the right thing to do. I understand why it's the right thing to do because my company told me about it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to follow the policies. It you do it with enough policies, and now you have really good buy-in from your workforce because now they just blindly trust you, which is, I mean, they don't need to blindly trust you, but they're less suspicious. They're less, I know better than them in their attitude. I don't need to be that safe. You don't want those people in your company, and I think you can train it out of them.
So speaking of trust, we had a question pop up from Dominic that sounds like at least one person out there, and I'm quite sure it's many more of you, may be having some trust issues with the workforce. Dominic said that work injury seems like it's becoming a trend now, even if trucks are in the parking lot next to each other and a truck at the dock is driving 2 miles an hour and there's a damage to the side view mirror, so obviously a very minor thing, they automatically get a lawyer and report being injured. He said it's getting more and more that very minor incidents are having injuries reported, and they see so many ads on the highways for injury attorneys. He said it's like giving them more ideas of chasing after easy money. So that's a really good point, Dominic. And Michael and I have talked about this a bit with, does it make sense to put these kind of horror stories in your employee's mind? Will that just give them ideas of how to claim a work injury? And that's kind of our point, is by telling them all of the bad things is dispelling that myth out there. So personal injury law is very different from workers' compensation law in Wisconsin and many other states. There are statutory caps to workers' compensation law. You cannot have these $1 million verdicts in workers' compensation laws in Wisconsin like you can in personal injury cases. And most other states, that's kind of the whole purpose of work comp. It's this bargain of, okay, we're going to make it a little easier to make your claim, but we're going to lower down the ceiling on exactly how much money you can get. So that is really frustrating when you are seeing an increase in these very, very minor incidents. And, we see that, I wouldn't say all the time, a lot of the cases we're dealing with are, your doctor says you're this percentage injured, my doctor says you're this percentage injured, let's fight about it. But there certainly are those employees out there who are untruthful and trying to scam the system. So I think our advice on that front would be to share these stories about how you're not really going to benefit and you're going to harm the workforce.
Yeah, I don't think workers' compensation and let me back up. When I was a younger attorney, there was a wizened judge in our state that would, as a matter of sort of their scripted speech, tell injured workers when they met with them that no matter how the case ends up, if they win every point on the case, they are still not going to get paid enough for their injury. And he was just very upfront about it. This was not a judge we liked having. This was a judge that paid a lot of claims, but he was very upfront with the injured workers and said, know right now, like, lower your expectations. This is not you're never going to get a windfall in workers' compensation. And, if you're injured bad enough, no amount of money is going to make up for the pain and suffering that you're going to feel, because workers' compensation doesn't pay pain and suffering. It's just never enough in workers' compensation. And I think that's an important point to repeat to your workers, because your injured workers, I mean, some of them know, they're the frequent flyers or whatever, but there are a lot of workers who really just don't have any idea about workers' compensation. We know this because we see them on our cases, whether they're represented by an attorney or not represented by an attorney. They're flying blind, and the workers' compensation, unfortunately, is one of those areas of law where kind of everybody, at the end of the day, when a case is resolved, more often than not, both parties are disappointed. unlike in other areas of law where both parties can walk away with a win-win. A couple of things that jogged my memory when Margaret was talking is, again, little things that blow up into big things. And maybe we should jump into some horror stories
Sure.
to sort of illustrate the point. But also kind of relating to workers, just automatically getting an attorney and just claiming they're injured. I think you're always going to have those people. The marketing out there for the personal injury attorney is I mean, it's flooding the zone, I think is the term that people are using these days, but it's just everywhere and it's constant. So that's going to get into people's head, and they're going to have dreams of what that could mean for them. There was a commercial the other day where the testimonial said, "I'm always going to trust Gruber." And I'm like, how many times are you planning on getting injured that you always need to trust them? Like one time should be enough in a lifetime. In any event, with the approach we're talking about, and obviously with just an A+ safety program, I think your employees can really start to feel that their employer cares about them, not as assets, not as human resources, but as people. And you care about them and their physical well-being, their mental well-being, their family well-being. It's all connected into this workers' compensation scheme. And when an employee knows their employer cares, they're they're just far less inclined to take advantage of their employer. You're never going to reach perfection in that instance. There's always going to be exceptions, but we're looking for optimal at least.
We have a question that came in from Alan asking, when their driver's in another state, is it still covered by the state they're based out of? So in Wisconsin, and I think most jurisdictions are like this, there are multiple jurisdictions that could have jurisdiction over the claim. So if a driver started a route from a terminal that's based in Indianapolis and they were making a delivery in Wisconsin, and the injury happened in either one of those or anywhere along the way, Wisconsin could have jurisdiction, or Indiana could have jurisdiction. An employee can never claim benefits in both states, but to the extent one state has better benefits than the other, if they already claimed benefits in the state with worse benefits, they might be able to kind of like get the cleanup in the second state, but it's only ever going to be one state at a time where they can't double dip and get benefits in multiple states. But to answer your question, multiple states can have jurisdiction. And again, Wisconsin, it's where it originates, where the business is domiciled, where they traveled through, the actual site of the accident.
And in practicality, the way it plays out a lot of times is the claim handler will make a judgment call on which state to handle the claim in. But that may not be set in stone. So I've had a lot of situations where the claim handler is handling it in another state, and then we get a Wisconsin hearing application. Well, now suddenly it's a Wisconsin claim. We work to resolve those claims in both jurisdictions, but it does get a little messy in those situations because you're dealing with two sets of law, two sets of calculations, and yeah, I mean those are situations where it's good to talk to a lawyer initially, and obviously once it gets to litigation. But jurisdiction fortunately does not come up all the time. In your line of business, though, I bet it comes up inordinately more than anybody else's.
Along those same lines, Alan had a kind of a follow-up question. And this is something we see frequently. If an accident or injury happens on someone else's property when unloading, is it someone's responsibility of that location where they were unloading? We see this all the time. And it totally depends on largely depends on the contracts that you have with that distributor, where the location. anywhere you're going to be dropping off product, you have some sort of agreement with them. Who's in charge? Is your employee an employee? Is it an independent contractor? And that varies a lot by jurisdiction. So there are a lot of specifics that go into the answer to that question.
I mean, a lot of times that's a foreseen risk, and your business contracts will address who's responsible in those situations. I mean, theoretically, if nobody addressed in advance, the location's owner, there could be liability there. Practically, though, now the injured worker's employer is asking themselves, do we want to jeopardize this business relationship by going after one of our customers to pay for our workers' work injury claim? So there's business considerations that go into it besides legal and contractual factors.
Yeah, and one thing that you definitely always want to work with those locations on is the investigation part. We see a lot if it's a loading and unloading claim that maybe the drive cam didn't capture what happened, but the location actually has camera footage. So again, that's a business decision of, do we want to entangle this partner of ours in this? But it can't hurt to ask for the footage so you can investigate and see what happened, even though it's not your site.
Yeah, and as is the theme of this discussion, of this presentation, talking about it with the stakeholders in advance goes a long way towards avoiding the messiness of not being prepared, really. And if you have a plan in place, it should work like clockwork, and it should be drama free, and you can get the best results, the best investigation. And again, just people thinking about it are by definition thinking about safety.
So we've talked a little bit about if you think about a carrot and a stick, we've talked about the stick portion of safety culture, but I want to talk a little bit too about the carrot portion of it, of encouraging your employees to be safety conscious, and maybe think if it makes sense in your safety program to reward employees when they point out something that's unsafe. If they come in and tell their manager, hey, there's a huge pothole right after this stair in the parking lot, and I think someone might trip on it, whatever your reward system is, if that's, I don't know, an extra hour lunch break, or a pizza lunch, or whatever size reward is appropriate for that.
Some people just feel rewarded being recognized for being a good employee.
Recognition, yes, but just encouraging people to say when they see unsafe things. Again, you hear in the airport all the time, if you see something, say something. We're not talking about tattling on people doing unsafe things, because we don't want to necessarily encourage that type of culture. But if you just have this really encouraging environment of, tell us, we're not trying to hide anything, like we want to know so we can fix it. If they do see a driver doing something really unsafe, like hopping, face first from their seat onto the ground, they don't have to go confront that driver, but it would be great if they came and told you, so that the safety manager could then go talk to that driver and say, I really don't want you to get hurt. Please turn around and use the 3-point turn every single time you're dismounting from your cab.
And I have a concrete example. It's sort of a Frankenstein of a couple cases, but I had a case where this worker had sort of like metal grate steps to exit the semi-tractor, and something about the grate, maybe a piece of metal was bent, so that one of the openings was too big, but it kept grabbing onto the treads in his work boots. And as he was trying to exit the cab, he'd try to pick up his foot, and he'd have to sort of force it out, and he'd lose balance, and he ended up sort of losing his grip, and maybe held on a little too long with one of his arms and really wrenched his arm. And again, might be conflating a couple different cases, but in one instance, he reported it to the employer and said, hey, this is a problem. I need somebody to fix it. And the employer kind of just blew him off. You know, in another instance, he didn't report it at all, and he just kept, you know, screwing around with this safety risk until he screwed around too many times and ended up injured. So, I mean, you can imagine either scenario, and neither is a good one. So you want the workers to report it, and then the reporters are probably going to expect some action if they report a safety risk. You know, if they say, hey, the sidewalk's getting a little uneven outside the terminal, um, you know, that should be dealt with. You know, I know it's a cost, but that should be dealt with in a reasonable period of time, or a yellow piece of, you know, a yellow line should be painted there, or a little sign, watch your step. I mean, there's things that can be done. And, you know, if you have workers reporting safety risks and they don't um, see any mitigation, they're gonna lose faith in sort of the idea of reporting the safety risks in the first place.
Something to keep impressing on your employees about how these small injuries, you know, these things really matter. The smallest thing can blow up into a really big injury. And it seems crazy, but we've had multiple injuries of these. I don't know if everyone's familiar with complex regional pain syndrome, CRPS. It's a kind of a nerve disorder where it's not muscular, it's not bone, it's something in your nerves that happens most often with crush injuries, and it's apparently just excruciating pain that you can't really get rid of. There are some medicines, and they'll try like burning the nerves to get rid of them. But we've had a couple cases where people have the seemingly most minor injury.
Like a broken, like, I mean, like a bruised finger.
Yep, like they could maybe shut their finger in the door or roll over their pinky toe with a wheelchair or a dolly. Broken toe. No big deal, right? Like you wouldn't even miss work for that. But it just, for whatever reason, whether it's their personal condition, their mental health, and in Wisconsin, we have to take an employee as they are. If they have all these problems, you know, mental health wise, that maybe made them more susceptible to it, that doesn't matter. It's still our problem. And it can blow up into a permanent total disability claim. We truly have multiple claims like that started with a smashed finger or a smashed toe. So I mean, you learned in kindergarten, right? Keep your fingers and toes away from hazards. And if your employees are constantly rolling dollies with product from the truck to the location, it's easy to kind of zone out and not pay attention to what you're doing. But reminding them that this tiny running over your toe with a dolly with a case of soda on it could leave you permanently totally disabled. Again, not trying to instill fear in them, but the seriousness of even these minor safety issues.
CRPS is a good condition to use to sort of as an example of how bad things can get, because it's first, it's a condition that a lot of people don't know about. And then second, I mean, it's really horribly bad. In addition to just having your hand or your foot feel like it's on fire, it's also in a lot of cases progressive. So it doesn't just stay there; it creeps down your arm in towards your body. Sometimes into your trunk. Sometimes you can injure one hand, and your brain somehow starts giving CRPS to the opposite limb. The brain and the nervous system is a funny thing, but it is an absolutely horrid condition, and it is also a condition that is almost always going to be disputed, because you can't see it, you can't
objectively test
you
for
can't
it.
objectively test for it. It is even every person who has it, they're almost always going to have that claim disputed, because it's one of those cases that's hard to believe, unless you go through all the steps to prove it, really. And by all the steps, I mean, you know, lawyer up and really put your money where your mouth is, sort of prove it. So that's a really good one to just sort of scare people off, because it's a horrible one to have, and it's it's going to be sort of the worst litigation process experience for them as well. Margaret also mentioned surgery's gone wrong. Surgeries are, people go under surgery all the time and nothing happens, and you feel better afterwards. That's not always the case. There are a lot of examples of complications from surgery. Sometimes it's because you don't have a good doctor. Sometimes it's just bad luck. You hit the lottery and you have the bad result. Sometimes it's because of things that the injured worker does. We see a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot. We see the occasional failed spine surgery because the injured worker didn't quit smoking like they were supposed to. They told their doctor they quit smoking, and then they went ahead and kept smoking. Spinal fusion won't heal, or a hip replacement, the hardware won't heal to the bone effectively if you're a heavy smoker. Add on top of it, if you're a diabetic or you have other comorbidities, there's a lot of things that can cause a surgery to go bad, and the doctors will warn them of these risks, but they warn everybody of the risks. So it's hard for the injured workers to say, "Oh, I'm the one that really has to worry in this situation."
I know we're getting down to kind of our last minute, so I'll let Steve go to the last slide that has our contact information on it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. Again, this was kind of just a general, some tips about improving your safety, so that you don't ever have to call us. But we know it happens no matter what you do. We hope you can pass some of this information along to your safety team and put it into practice. And again, we're happy to help in any way that you can. Just let us know.
Great.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Thank y'all very much. It's great information. I think it's a good thing to kind of talk about workers' compensation as it relates to the culture of safety in your company. It's something we talk about a lot. As all of you out there know, our thing is about safety training. We operate a learning management system where safety messaging can be assigned to the drivers and other employees to cover topics like this. As a matter of fact, we have a lot of content about various types of injuries that can happen as a truck driver that might result in a work comp claim. So I'm actually going to pop a poll question up here on the screen. If you'd like to know a little bit more about our system and how we might be able to help you create that safety culture with proper training and doing it in the right intervals to actually have an impact on people's behavior, we're certainly anxious to talk to you about that. And also those of you out there that are certified directors of safety under the NATME program, we can provide you with an attendance certificate so you can claim your recertification points for having attended the webinar. So while y'all are responding to the poll, one question that I have for y'all before we adjourn is the example I thought of. If a driver is injured and a work comp claim is underway, is there anything then that would prevent that person from bringing in a plaintiff's lawyer and suing for personal injury? If the work comp claim is underway, does that somehow stop a personal injury claim, or can they sue you regardless?
Go ahead.
In Wisconsin, workers' compensation is the exclusive remedy. So if you are hurt in the course and scope of your employment, you cannot also make a personal injury claim.
Okay.
There are third-party cases. If there is something like a car accident, you're driving for work, you can't recover more from the employer, but maybe if someone else hit you, you could get increased compensation that way.
And this concept is I'm not going to say in every single jurisdiction, but I think it's pretty universal, where the third party claim can exist alongside the workers' compensation claim. And most workers' compensation defense attorneys know how to navigate those situations. A lot of times, or I shouldn't say a lot of times, but there are times where maybe the personal injury case is in a different state than the workers' compensation claim. And you may need to coordinate counsel in both jurisdictions to make sure that you handle that the appropriate way.
Okay.
And in those situations, the workers' compensation carrier should have some subrogation rights. Either to get a piece of the settlement or the award in the third party claim. In our state, there's a statutory formula. It's not a dollar for dollar, but there may be a more generous subrogation opportunity in other states.
Very good. Very good. Margaret, Michael, thank you very much. I think we've kind of run out of time, and I know people have
having
to
us.
bail out to go on with the rest of their days. But thank you very much for joining us. It's great information. I think if nothing else, it just reinforces the need to have a viable, proper safety program in your company to create that culture of safety where people are going to do all the right things, even when nobody's looking, so to speak. So when you get there, I think you've been successful. So Margaret, Michael, thank you very much, and appreciate your time. And thanks to everybody that joined us today. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Bye now.